So I'd like to welcome everyone to, this is our second series of speaker series of the Spanish and Portuguese Business Network that we've just started. We had a very good first series. We had Gabbay, not related to Ron, but same last name. And we had Lawrence Steinberg from Lawrence Steinberg Wealth Management. And I thought he gave a great presentation, sort of his take on the economy and where it's going and what to think about, and so on and so forth. So it was a very good first start, and I think we're going to build this program up over time and try to bring value to everyone and really take advantage of the network. Now I'd like to introduce Ron Gabbay, who's a long-standing member of the Spanish and Portuguese, and he's going to talk about his business, which he's in the coffee business, and talk about his business evolution over the years. And I believe his children are now participating in the business with him. So I'm very interested to hear his story. And following that, we're going to have Ron introduce, well, we'll have some questions and answers. And then Ron will introduce Alana and Tasso from Richter, and they're going to enlighten us. With no further ado, Ron, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, David, and good afternoon to everyone. My business life has been a long, long journey. I started working for my father in Lebanon in the mid-60s, long time ago. And we were in a typical small environment there. He taught me few principles that stuck with me. Be ethical, be honest, take good care of your clients, and service them. They will reward you. Fantastic advice. Unfortunately, due to the difficult events taking place in the Middle East, my father sent me and my brother Kamal to Canada to open a business in coffee there. Great. We came to Montreal, where we had so many good friends and family and relations. And by the way, talking about family relations, David, Oren is related to me. His father, David, and myself are second or third cousins. I don't know the history, but we are all related. So I was saying, we came to Canada, we opened an office, fantastic. We had desks and chairs. And what do? We came to the country, we had instantly to adjust to a new social environment, different traditions, even a different English language from the Shakespearean English we studied at school. It was not funny, but we rolled our sleeves, and in time, we found niches in the market where our different know-how and the great support from long-term suppliers we had built over the years in producing countries helped us move forward. Coffee trade is a very old trade. It's a traditional trade where little changes in years. You grow the coffee, you pick it, you process it, ship it, send it to the consuming countries, they roast it and sell it to various customers. The trade in Canada was basically, for small importers like me, was a jobbing business. You buy locally from New York and bring it to Canada and sell it to various clients. But we started a different way. We started importing directly from origin. We presented choices to our customers. And slowly, we established strong local relationships in Canada. Over the years, the business grew. Our clients appreciated the good service and our ethical approach. And unfortunately, after 30 years together, myself and my brother Kamal had different approaches to the business and different outlook for the future. You know, it's part basically of family continuity. Our children grew, and the issue of continuity of the business surfaced in the back of our minds. To make a long story short, we agreed to part way amicably. And today, we are not only great brothers, but best friends. So the moral of it is simply, we turned a difficult situation where you see businesses go down the drain due to irreconcilable differences between family members into a great opportunity. We each continued on our own and built different but successful businesses. Now, starting each on our own, we realized that we built something valuable. Our clients remained staunchly loyal to either myself or my brother. That is great. But, you know, looking forward, I realized that I was putting on the years. A middle-aged businessman, soon to be a senior citizen, and the business needed a sense of continuity in the future. On top of it, we needed extra hands in the office. Well, I turned to Natalie, my daughter, who was already becoming quite successful on Wall Street, rising in the ranks of Lehman Brothers. Yes, the famous old Lehman Brothers, who rewarded her with a healthy six-figure salary and all kinds of extras. What could I do? Well, I made her an offer she could not refuse. She was tempted as she found Wall Street too dry, too selfish, and full of huge egos. I asked her to join me for a convention, a coffee convention in Costa Rica. Beautiful country, beautiful land, flowers, and very welcoming country. She was charmed by the more humane business, while we were working with small family enterprises close to the hard-working producers. She finally accepted to join me 15 years ago. And she brought to the business new social ideas that today we describe as sustainability. What is sustainability? Well, after all, coffee is coffee, but sustainability represents what the various players in the coffee business provide the coffee growers in order for them to have a decent life on their farms. We're looking at farms, small farms worldwide, where the farmers is very poor. Sustainability brings them the potential to educate their children with access to good health care and entice future generation to willingly continue to work in the family estates. Also, sustainability brings new deep care for the environment. The water getting polluted and byproduct being thrown around with no recycling. So really, at a time where 15 years ago, sustainability was not a fashionable word, we started a project in the middle of a guerrilla country in Colombia, where we invested our own money to elevate the standards of the farmers with new, for instance, bathrooms in schools, equipment to the farmer to make their life easier, their working life easier, and so on and so forth. We proceeded with educating the farmers and their families, building computer rooms so they can surf the internet, get connected to the world. Don't forget, we are talking about guerrilla country where there is no easy access to the modern amenities. We built for them labs so they can test their products. They can taste it and know exactly what they are producing. Then we started classes for the next generation to train them in business practices and empower them to take full charge. Our sustainable team kept expanding, and we started project to assist farm workers. Who are the farm workers? These are the people who don't own land. They hop from one farm to another to work to make a living. These are the same people that are crossing the border into the USA to find jobs so they can send money to their families. They are at the bottom of the pecking order in the industry. We worked also on environmental projects to protect the rivers from pollution and recycling the byproducts of coffee. Now, what we did is nothing huge. It was on a small scale, 50, 60 farmers here, 80 farmers there, few farmers in another direction. They were pilot projects that we funded ourselves, but they presented great value for our clients who suddenly could build around our ideas and projects. No, we were not the only ones doing it, but suddenly we moved our company right on the front row of the coffee industry. We presented potential solutions to our clients' sustainability projects. Imagine you are a supplier to Loblaws, and Loblaws comes to you and says, well, what can you offer me a sustainability project? You have no idea. That's what we built. We told our customers, we have all these ideas for you. We have a team working for you in Colombia and in Central America. Tell us what you need, we will help you. Of course, on the other side, we are a business for profit, and it attracted to us clients, large multinationals, names that you see every day when you buy or drink your cup of coffee. We presented them with potential solutions to their problem. In short, what I'm saying here is if you don't present value to your customers, they honestly don't need you. Walmart can go directly to China, but if you present to them value that they cannot get on their own, yes, you will be a supplier. Going forward, my son Jonathan joined us 10 years ago, and he is today the anchor in administration, and he loves specialty coffee. He specializes in that. Together with his sister, Natalie, and a fantastic loyal team, they will lead the business into the future. And over the past few years, we expanded our business in the USA with an office in Los Angeles and in Bogota, Colombia, where our sustainability team resides. That's great. That's fantastic. I'm rewarded. I have an ongoing business, profitable business. But where does the family estate go from here? I have my two of my children in the business. One is not in the business. He's working on Wall Street and enjoying it. What happens in the future when I go? I'm not so young, and the siblings start fighting over the estate. They disagree what they want. Two siblings residing in the USA, creating huge, complex tax implications. One here in Canada. Well, yes, no matter how far you go and how much you succeed, there are always dark clouds in the horizon if you look far enough. Well, one day I brought together my children and I asked them what would you like to do with the future of the business. Of course, they did not expect the question. They faced difficult question, difficult, that any one of us faces only one time in a lifetime. How often do you lose your parents? Once only. But then other issues come up. So they were facing difficult questions about the future inheritance. And we all know how fights always started, or not always, but started in so many families. Families where the family bonds melted away. Disaster, infighting, hatred, and all kinds of emotional facts that take place. Well, to make it short, after many meetings with professionals, including our dear Alana here, who will be speaking to us soon, my children gave me a unique lifetime reward. They decided to stay together, to keep the business going, and share together in the future investments and benefits. The three of them signed an agreement that they drafted together with the professionals. I was not involved. They made my life easy, and I thank the Lord for it. But how many times does this happen? How many times can you bring and keep the family together? And that's why we have today our speakers, Alana Geller and Tasso Lagios from the reputable firm, chartered accountant firm of Richter. And Richter specializes, among other things, on small and large family businesses. They guide them into the future. They guide them how they can continue the business and have continuity in their inheritance. That's what attracted me to Richter. And I moved from one of the big 5 chartered accountant firms to Richter, who could give me this personal service of taking care of me and my family. Without going any further, I would like to introduce our 2 guests. First, Alana is a great friend. She helped me navigate the waters that so many businesses face and solve so many issues that come to us. And Alana works closely with corporate executives, business owners and their families, as well as the broader legal community in the areas of business valuation and dispute advisory. She's practical, methodical in her approach to problem solving, and prides herself on being creative and collaborative. Alana is originally from Toronto, and she did something exceptional. Instead of moving out of Montreal to Toronto, she came from Toronto to Montreal, and she currently resides working actively in both Toronto and Montreal. Outside the office, she is a doting mother of 5 young boys. And I can say she has the respect of so many people doing it. She has to take care, actually, not 4 boys, but 5 boys, her husband and kids. And she enjoys contributing meaningfully to community life. She is passionately involved in causes concerning children's health, diversity, and inclusion. And she's an active member of the Chartered Business Valuation Community. Now, turning to Tasso Lagios, he's a managing director at Richter. He has been working with and guiding highly successful business owners, entrepreneurs, and their families. And you will note that both in the case of Alana and Tasso, families are included. So he worked on a variety of matters dealing with wealth transition, business succession, governance, and a whole array of complex taxation matters. His ability to listen, understand, and synthesize the many complex issues faced by high net worth individuals makes him a valued partner for more just his business acumen and creativity. For more than 30 years, and you look much younger than 30 years at work, Tasso's goal has been to make every client feel comfortable and confident that their financial roadmap is in good hands. So without taking any more time, I present to you Alana and Tasso.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Very, very much. I want to just let everyone know, I didn't match Ron with Alana and Tasso, knowing that he even had a relationship with Alana, with Richter. It's just sort of coincidental, and I think actually very appropriate for the next presentation. And Ron, I wanted to thank you for really being so open and sharing with all of us. You know, I mean, I think you've given us a big gift today, and we really appreciate it. So I'll now leave it to Alana and Tasso to move forward.
Ron, I'm quite inspired by your presentation, and it's an amazing segue. Thank you, first of all, for coming over and joining our family at Richter. And I just wanted to tell you that it's quite an inspiring story, and I took a lot of notes during your presentation on things I can use personally. So I guess David and I have a relationship now going back a number of years, and I guess about a year ago, he approached me and said, would I be interested in doing a presentation to the Spanish and Portuguese congregation, sort of the synagogue? And I said, of course I would. Not only would I like to do a presentation, I'd actually like to do two of them. So this is actually the first in a series that we're going to do. We're going to do one today and one in about a month. And maybe I'll start off by asking Alana to put up before I actually start off, I actually have two partners I just want to recognize for being here today. First of all, Mark Yedid, who works in the area of our transaction advisory and planning area of our business. He advises as well a lot of families, works with a lot of private equity, both in Canada and the US, and he's worked closely with David, and I wanted him to be here as well. And he also has a long history and affiliation with the Spanish and Portuguese congregation and community. And I actually have asked Justine Delille, who's also on the line, and she will be the presenter for the second series, the second presentation, which is, I think, on May 25th, if I'm not mistaken. And that has to do with the second part, which I'll touch on very briefly as I start this presentation and then hand it over to Alana. So maybe Alana, put on the presentation, if you don't mind. Just in the interest of time, I'll sort of go to the second slide. So transferring your business, family business. So I think, I always say that, a picture says is 1,000 words, and I always like to illustrate what I think has become our personal branding around how we look at family businesses and what are the components of family businesses and what do business owners have to consider. And what this two-circle model pretty much illustrates is that a family business is complex, as Ron indicated, has a lot of components to it. It doesn't only have the business interests, which are on the left side of this presentation. It has the owners, who are the people that own the business. But behind every owner and behind all these stakeholders are also the family interests, and they are also part of the equation, because as much as we believe that there's a separation and a distance between the business and the owners, the family is very, very much involved, whether they're involved in the business or just a stakeholder in the business. Clearly, they are involved in the business, and we always like to illustrate this as an illustration for everyone to understand how the pieces come together, and you'll hear through our presentation how, in fact, those pieces do come together. Just on transforming your business, I always say that, you know, although entrepreneurs, like many of you on this call, like to keep things quite flexible and agile. I always have I have a dear client of mine who says, I have a long-term strategy that changes daily. So I always like that saying. It's something that we don't want to take away from entrepreneurs, but what we like to do is say to them that as much as we want to continue to have agility and ability to allow you to be that entrepreneur that created the success in the business, we also want people to have a guiding beacon in the business and have a long-term plan, because then it allows the business to align all its interests. And that applies whether you're looking to transfer the business from one generation to the other, or whether you're looking to professionalize the organization and run it with outside management, and sometimes those two come together, or whether you're looking to sell some or part of the business. The foundation needs to be strong, and the business needs to know where it's going, and all the pieces need to align. And that's a key element of what we try to do with many of our clients, is have that alignment, have that clear direction where the business is going, and then ultimately align all the interests of all the stakeholders. So over to Alana, and then I'll be Vanna Wright on this presentation, and I'll jump in at the appropriate time.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having us, and thanks, Tasso. So before we start, we wanted to make sure or hope that each of you can see yourselves in some way through our presentation. Perhaps you're managing a family business or are a successor to a family business. Some of you may be a spouse to an owner. You may yourself be thinking about transitioning or going through a transition. Some of you may be advisors to a family business and not sure how to help. Some may be the owners of a passive interest in a family business, or perhaps you're an employee hoping to succeed in a family business. And you may be connected in one of these ways to a private business, and private businesses really behave in many cases very similar to a family business. So while we're going to talk a lot today about family businesses, many of these concepts apply equally to non-family privately held businesses. So in terms of our agenda, essentially the presentation is divided into two sections. The first one is really providing a framework to better understand your business. And the second section will focus on transforming your business. And throughout, we'll present case studies of family businesses to help illustrate the concepts. We will hopefully have time for a short Q&A, and then we'll leave you with some reflective questions. So the first component, as I mentioned, is understanding your family business. And essentially, we're going to present a framework which will analyze a family business in terms of its individuals, the relationships between them, and the environment in which they exist. And together, these elements shape a business and ultimately the family's long-term strategy. So starting with the individuals, there is a lot of chatter about the power of public company executives. And part of this flows from the fact that they're in the public domain. But in reality, if you think about it, family business owners, in many cases, have a lot more power in a family business than they would in a public company, although this power is often exerted quietly and not on display for others to see. If a family business owner works in the business, they're typically employed in the role far longer than they would be in a public company, and they also have overarching powers. Interestingly, at first you might think only of employees and owners, but they're not the only ones who have a significant influence over the direction and strategy of a family business. You can consider spouses, parents, children, siblings, trusted advisors, and others. All of these people can have a tremendous impact on the business. And more so than in a public company, these individuals really shape the business. Their character, their personal goals and desires, their capabilities, and even their health and well-being can dramatically impact a family business's strategy and ultimately its success or failure in achieving it. Moving to relationships. So if you think a little bit about relationships, And outside of a family business, healthy familiar relationships may be characterized as being inclusive, loving.
Different from what you see in a business. So while the family relationships are inclusive, loving, protective, emotional, usually informal, intuitive, and forgiving, in a business setting, these relationships, say between a senior and their subordinate, will be structured, rational, performance-based, analytical, and detached. And lastly, an ownership relationship may be governed by votes or influence. However, if you think about it, what happens when the executive is, say, your father, who owns the business, you're the divisional manager and a successor, and these overlapping relationships are far more delicate. And so the importance of proper governance and ownership arrangements and aligned compensation in these situations is critical. So next we move to the environment in which these individuals and these relationships live. So you can think about the business life cycle. Is the business a startup? Is it established? Is it going through financial hardship? Or perhaps it's going through a period of rapid growth. Then there's the generational life cycle. Is the business transitioning from a founder to one child, or from multiple siblings to, say, a consortium of cousins? What about industry trends? What opportunities or challenges lie ahead for the company? There are business stakeholders, which include employees, customers, suppliers, and capital providers. If you think about Ron's story, there's the importance of the culture and the people in the organization, the geography in which the business lives. There's a legal and tax regime, the importance of financial reporting and other reporting and governance. And keep in mind that these circumstances are ever changing. Businesses are never static. And here everything comes together. So having a solid understanding of the individuals in a family business, the relationships between them, the environment within which they interact enables a thoughtful and practical strategic planning process for both the family and the business. With this, the business is primed for a successful transformation. So I want to introduce you to a hypothetical case study. We're going to call them the Goldberg family. And they've been blessed with a successful fourth generation distribution business. The business was founded in 1930. It was first passed to a son-in-law, then to a grandson, and more recently to a great-grandson. And we assisted the family with the fourth transition, particularly to make sure that the mistakes of the past were not repeated. So let's see what happened. So first, there were three, just go back.
Here?
Yeah, more.
Here? Further back? I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Here. Okay.
No problem. So first, there were three, what I'll characterize as not so successful transitions. And why do I say that? So the business remained, it continued to be successful, but the first three transitions resulted in significant family conflict and saddled the business with legacy costs. In some cases, sadly here, individuals were very hurt and relationships were severed or put on hold for many years. And after learning of the first three troubled transitions, Gen 4 was not interested in taking over the business. But Gen 3, the current management and owner, they really wanted to make it work. So what they did was they treated the transition much like an arm's length negotiation. It was facilitated with clear ground rules that were set from the outset and a very clear time frame. So there was about 8 months to make it happen. After such time, Gen 4 said that they were going to be out, and Gen 3 would have to take a different alley other than transitioning. So also a new thing for, ultimately it was successful. The business did transition to Gen 4. Different than how the business had been managed in the past, Gen 4 put in place a professional management team. So they cleaned house, so to speak, with Gen 3's permission, honed the business strategy, hired professional managers, and put in place an appropriate compensation system. So before we learn a little bit more about the Goldbergs, we'll talk a little bit about the power and complexity of family ownership. So these are some characteristics that you typically see in a family business. The first, and I've seen this over and over again, is an unparalleled level of care. So you heard how Ron spoke, and I would say that is reminiscent of most entrepreneurs that we work with. Owners care deeply, and they often don't delegate key decisions for their family or for their business to others. The next is sustaining power. So we talked about how in a family business, typically roles are held far longer than in a public company or in a non-family business. Family businesses tend to be less bureaucratic. They can make decisions more quickly. They tend to be characterized with highly trusting relationships with key stakeholders. And there is usually higher employee retention and engagement. With this power, it can be destructive. So if you think about a non-family company, decision-making often lies with the independent board members, which operates as a check and balance. However, in a family business, business owners make and break the rules. Also, in family companies, ownership is often very complex. So there are various forms of ownership, if you think about trusts and preferred shares and other share classes. And there's also other implications such as tax, the psychology of being an owner or an employee or being passive. There are financial concerns and also cultural concerns. So tying some of these concepts back to the Goldberg family, there really was an unparalleled level of care. And while the complex and conflict-ridden transition process was really overcome by respect, Gen 4's respect for the family legacy, and it was this respect that supported the successful Gen 4 transition. In terms of sustaining power, over its 90-year history, the business did hit some setbacks. And this power came from the longevity of the key relationships, the family's ability and flexibility to inject capital, provide personal guarantees, as well as employee loyalty. All of these factors supported the business during hard times such that it thrives today. Destructive power, of course, the complicated family dynamics and the high degree of legacy costs saddled the business. Gen 4's desire not to repeat history almost led to a third-party sale. And lastly, in terms of complexity, so the transition from Gen 3 to Gen 4 resulted in multiple share classes. There were important transient veto powers that were offered to Gen 3. Specifically, while Gen 3's investment remained material, it retained the ability to veto important decisions in respect of the sale of the business, leverage, CapEx, and other similar things. There were also specific protections afforded to a non-owner daughter-in-law who was employed in the business. This was something that was very important to Gen 3. So moving on, the next section, it's the last section in terms of understanding and navigating important topics in your family enterprise, and then we'll move to transformation. And there are 3 different frameworks we'll look at, the 2 circles, which you saw, 3 circles, and 4 rooms. So in terms of the 2 circles, Tasso explained this at the outset. It's simple to understand and really brings together all the pieces and the importance of integration. In respect of the next one, so many of you have probably seen this before. It is a 3-circle model, and it's helpful to have these perspectives when navigating major matters. When faced with a decision, an individual's role as a family member, owner, or employee impacts their perspective. It's critical that they understand the perspectives of other roles. This becomes more complex, especially when the circles intersect. Consider Ron's story, his relationship with his children. He's their father, their leader in the company, and the owner of the business. When making significant decisions, he needs to consider all of these roles and the impact on his children and the business. The last framework is what's called the 4 rooms. So in addition to what we saw in the 3 circles, this adds a boardroom. So each room has different characteristics. You can think of the owner room as being characterized by power and influence, the boardroom by wisdom and judgment, the management room by competence and execution, and the family room hopefully by love, unity, and development. Just to take a look at how the placement of the rooms is very intentional. So management answers to the board reports to the owners, But the family room is intentionally alongside each group. They should maintain influence and unity. And many families choose to develop family members to have thriving careers in the business. The point is, whether the family members are inside the business or not, their perspectives need a forum to be heard with proper governance. And while the business remains with Gen 1, this may seem less important, but over time, it's paramount. So now we get to transforming your business. And the important thing in here is there's many ways to do this and not one size fits all. We're going to discuss the possibility of selling your business versus transitioning into your family or a professional team. And there's also the possibility to do both, which we refer to as a hybrid. So here we outline how you might achieve these objectives. So starting with the possibility of selling, we suggest a couple of things here, and these are things to do way before you're actually ready to sell your business. The first is developing, and all of these things will help maximize value. So the first is developing or honing your strategy so that you'll attract a strategic buyer, because this is the best way to maximize value. The next element is diversification of the management team. So if a buyer is looking at your business and as the founder, you're the key person who has their hands in everything, your business, absent all other factors, will command a lower price than if you had a professional management team or perhaps some of your family members filling various roles. The point is to try and move some of the key functions away from one person. It's also important to manage the balance sheet and record actual earnings to maximize profits. In a hybrid model, there's a lot of different ways that this could be accomplished, but you might sell certain assets or divisions to a third party and retain a portion to transition. You might divide your assets between successors. So if you think back to Ron's story, he talked about how he and his brother each led a portion of the business. So this is a division. The last piece is you might seek a minority or majority partner to invest in your business, allowing you to take some chips off the table, so to speak. And the last piece is transition. And again, there's different ways to do this, but certainly it would involve building capabilities, either within your family members, to a professional team, or some combination. And then the importance of aligning governance systems and appropriate compensation is paramount to an effective transition. Here, we're going to discuss why you might choose one of these various things. So you may be thinking about why would I sell versus transition or do a hybrid? So why sell? And again, every business is different. So perhaps you're saying, well, my future is unclear. I don't know where I'm going. I don't like my industry anymore, or whatever it may be. It may be that you have a very successful business, but you'd like to diversify or de-risk. You may feel that you have no succession plan and the path is unclear. Sometimes an entrepreneur receives an offer that they simply cannot refuse. And in other cases, it may be that your family dynamics are not well suited to holding the business long-term, and you prefer to sell it. Why a hybrid? So you may desire some liquidity, and your children may wish to carry on the business. So a hybrid may allow you to sell off a division or a certain pool of assets, and this could result in meeting diverging objectives. And this could also resolve conflict if the family can't agree what to do. The last piece is why transition. So perhaps you feel the future is bright. Hopefully your children want to continue your legacy. Or it could be that you don't feel the business today would currently demand a desirable price. The last element we're going to cover here are some things to keep in mind when you're undertaking one of these transformative processes. So in terms of selling, and these are just a few tips, we suggest limiting discussions to the owners and the board at the outset, and you may include some advisors in there on a confidential basis. Of course, the news that a business is for sale can have many undesirable consequences with employees, customers, or otherwise. Another thing to think about is many sales processes fail. There is an enormous effort and cost involved, and you will definitely be distracted from your normal role. So really be sure and think it through before you start. Seller's remorse is real. Again, take some time to think about what it will feel like to sell your business before undertaking a process. And the last piece is protecting your assets. So proceeds are very easy to spend after a liquidity event, far easier than if your wealth is tied up in your business. So protect your assets, and we'll cover this in more detail in our next session in a few weeks. In terms of the hybrid, consider dividing your assets between your children. So again, let's say one child desires liquidity and the other wishes to carry on a business. Some things to think about. This might be hard to do equitably. So let's say the business retained performed fabulously well. Your child who received cash might be resentful a few years down the road. This could result in family conflict and competition. It could also result in lost synergies. So if assets are divided, some synergies may be lost. The management team that once supported a larger business may result in lower profits for whatever is left. And in terms of transition, keep in mind that choices have an enduring impact. So I've been recently working with a family that transitioned from Gen 2 to Gen 3 many years ago before we knew them. And now the Gen 3 representative has changed his mind and he no longer wishes to be president of the business. It's unclear to me if he really thought things through when the transition was initially completed. Be mindful of your own financial well-being. So if you're the founder of a business or the current owner, make sure that your own financial being is protected before undergoing a transition. And of course, consider that things will evolve over time. You can't plan for everything. The best thing you can do is support your business and your family and your key employees. And this can be done through outside professionals and also having a functioning performance management process and good governance system. Always think about your life both inside and outside your business. And again, we keep repeating this, but support with thoughtful ownership and governance arrangements. So taking you back to the Goldberg family. So here, the choice to sell or transition. So interestingly here, over the 4 generations, the family constantly spun off non-core assets while the core business was retained and transitioned. And that's a pattern that we see helps to build some liquidity outside of the business, but keep the family's legacy going. In terms of paving the way and building capabilities, so interestingly here, the Gen 4 representative did not start working in the business right out of school. At first, he trained as a professional and then worked in industry before coming into the family business. Another thing that happened here was the management transition from Gen 3 to Gen 4 took place over a very prolonged period of time. So again, similar to Ron's story, in this case, it took place over about 10 years. In terms of ownership and governance, so control transitioned to Gen 3, but as I mentioned, to Gen 4, but Gen 3 retained important veto rights to protect its investment and certain family members in the business. Additionally, in terms of governance on a quarterly basis throughout the transition period and the payout period, which was about 5 years, the key stakeholders participated in facilitated meetings with, I'll call it, a thoughtful agenda to foster transparency and communication and provide a forum for people to talk about the real issues that were bothering them. We also spent a lot of time making sure that all parties involved and the business were financially well. So we wanted to make sure that Gen 3 had appropriate liquidity without causing hardships to the business. So the investment was paid off over time and the company had the flexibility to extend in the event that the business had a setback. So in this last section, we'll discuss how to align your compensation system with your long-term strategy. So here you might consider strategies to make your professional team feel like part of the family. It's important to note that many professional executives tread cautiously when accepting or navigating a position in a family business. So how can you help them? In terms of key objectives for your compensation system. So the first is to attract and retain key talent to achieve family and business objectives. Secondly, you want to incentivize and reward executives to think like owners, not like employees. It's important to foster long-term collaboration and commitment to grow the business. and to share profits with employees, ideally in a tax efficient manner. In terms of compensation framework best practices, many of you are probably familiar with these concepts, but there are 3 key elements of compensation. The first is base salary, and we suggest that be benchmarked to a comparable position. The second piece is a short-term incentive plan, or an STIP, which is essentially a short-term cash bonus. And this is often based on a percentage of base salary. Sometimes it has a target, it often has a maximum, and it is generally paid out as a combination of both company performance and individuals' performance, and there may be some other metrics such as team performance, depending on the business. The last piece is a long-term incentive plan, or an LTIP. Sometimes this is real equity or something that looks like equity, or it could be some type of long-term bonus. And the LTIP may be paid in equity or cash or some combination. The important thing is that you pay for performance, and also that objectives are aligned, so that compensation mirrors both the family objectives and the business's long-term objectives. Diving a little bit further into key pillars of an effective long-term incentive plan, or LTIP. So the first question is how much, the calculation. So some business owners derive the LTIP calculation based on earnings. Sometimes it's based on value, or a combination of the two. The next question is how much. So I mentioned the target may be based on the person's base salary. It's also going to be tied back to the owner's appetite to share, and of course, market considerations. In terms of vesting, that means when the employee earns the LTIP. So it could be immediately or phased in over time. Typically, a phased approach helps to foster retention. It could be paid out in, say, equal tranches. So sometimes there's a 5-year plan with an equal percentage being paid in each year, or it might be what's called a cliff vest. So it all vests at the end. And there are different permutations and combinations of those. The measurement date is really important. So sometimes it ties back to when the employee started. Other times it ties back to the inception of the plan or some other date. And then there's the importance of triggering events. So every plan is different, but typically plans will cover what happens if the employee retires, if they're terminated for different reasons, if the business or division is sold, if the employee dies or becomes seriously disabled, or if there's some type of business transition. The last pillar is the payout. So when is it paid? So again, this could be immediate or phased. Obviously, the phased helps with retention. Usually payouts are accelerated upon certain triggering events, and these can be different depending on the event. And the last piece is just to be aware of CRA rules. And essentially what that means is if the payout period is too long, then the employee can end up being taxed before they actually receive the payout, which is obviously not good. In terms of the LTIP at a high level, I'm just going to cover some different types. There are a lot of different options. Ultimately, they can all get you to the same place in terms of cash value that accrues to the employee, but they all have different characteristics. So a long-term bonus is usually a cash bonus with long-term objectives and some type of prolonged payout. And it's generally taxed as employment income and would be fully deductible by the company. Moving along, there's a phantom plan, which many of you have probably heard of, or a stock appreciation right. This usually mirrors equity, but it is ultimately paid in cash, and it's generally taxed in the same way as a long-term bonus. The next option is a stock option. So this means an option to purchase equity in the future. Some stock option plans result in employees owning equity, others just result in an effective payout for cash. And depending on how the plan is structured, an employee may benefit from a lower tax rate. And the last one is real equity. This would generally be governed by a very thoughtful shareholders agreement, which would protect the family and the key owners. And this probably has a favorable tax regime for the employee. It would usually be taxed as capital gains, which is a lower rate, and it might even be eligible for a lifetime capital gains exemption, which means all or a portion of it may be tax-free. Coming back for the last time to the Goldberg family. So there was a review of the compensation system. As I mentioned, Gen 4 hired a new team. They revamped the compensation system to include both an appropriate short-term plan and a long-term plan. And over time, any legacy arrangements were phased out. There was an appetite to foster an ownership mindset. So the management team worked together to hone the business's long-term strategic plan, making sure that it jived with the family's goals, and compensation was then incentivized to help the team achieve plan. Taking care of the family. So Gen 3 maintained a material investment, as I mentioned, which was paid out over about 5 years. So we made sure that an appropriate return on the investment was provided to Gen 3 and deducted from profits or value that were shared with the employees. And lastly, the importance of governance and ownership arrangements. So the employees were party to a thoughtful agreement here, as they did receive real equity, and great efforts were made to balance both transparency and privacy in terms of communication. So we have time. I hope we have time for a little Q&A.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. I know it's a big subject to cover in about 45 minutes, but you did a fantastic job. And does anyone have any questions? Elan, I see your hand up.
Yeah. Hi. Great presentation. Thank you. Do you find the families more and more want to implement some kind of donation part into their business as they give it to the next generation, say a family foundation? And if so, when do you think the right moment is to implement it or introduce it to a family with the idea?
Want to take that, Tasso?
Yeah, sure. So hi, Elaine, how are you?
Well,
So yeah, we definitely have families who sort of think about charitable giving, whether they own the business, whether they want, but I would say in most instances, it's a discussion point at the family level that sort of takes place outside the business. We'll hear a little bit more about that on May 25th, but definitely something in many instances, it's highly considered during a monetization transaction. So when they do sell the business, it's front and center. Actually, Justine and I are meeting with family next week, where we're having our first family meeting post the monetization, and philanthropy is front and center, trying to understand sort of, you know, what their responsibility is as a family to give back to the community. And they are talking about it, but in many instances, a lot of families, the discussion is not held at the business level per se, but more so at the family and at the family office level, where these types of discussions do take place.
Anyone else have a question?
Hey David, this is Phil. So apologies, I had to drop out at one point, so I apologize if you've already covered this. But I'm curious in the context of transition and where, you know, some of the Gen 2 or 3 may be involved in the business and others not. What are successful ways that you've seen navigating compensation, like salaries and things like that, where it's not always, you know, when it's family, it's not always 100% market based, and Gen 1 may have certain desire to compensate others, or people are in and out. I just want to know if you had any thoughts on that.
Sure, I can start, Tasso, and then you can add in. I think, you know, first and foremost, a lot of times, and you know, Ron touched on this a little bit, where we see conflict is because of a lack of communication and transparency. For first and foremost, whatever you're going to do, it's best that everybody who needs to be in the know is in the know, and so people understand what's going on, and often that can alleviate a lot of problems. The other thing, and this doesn't work for everything, for every family, so we need to sort of understand what the current status quo is. But usually, even if there's a legacy, some type of legacy arrangement, our suggestion is that over time, if there are certain shareholders that are in the business and others that aren't, that the family try as much as possible to stick to something that is close to market. And if determining what market is difficult, there are a lot of ways to do that, such as engaging an expert to assist with it, perhaps to do benchmarking surveys now and again, or other elements. So it's really transparency, communication, getting people to sign off, and if possible, paying people at market.
Yeah, I would agree with Alana, sort of what Alana just said, but I would also say that the lines become blurry around this point, right? So this is where sort of the family sort of bleeds into sort of the business, and a lot of people look at what they compensate their children as the way they treated them as young children, like allowances, and they set them all at the same amount, and they think that is the right thing to do. I would say it may be right from one perspective. It probably isn't the smart thing to do. So back to Alana's point is, I think what's most important is transparency, communication, and trying to get it as close as possible to fair market value. I think that's sort of, you know, I've had a situation where a family tore, 9 cousins involved in a business. It tore them apart. That was one of the main points, is they treated them all the same in many respects, including compensation. So
that's a great question, Phil, and a great answer. Albert Herskovich, I think you've got a question.
Yes, please. Thank you very much for these 2 amazing presentations. I appreciate it very much. When you're in a business, in a family business such as the one that Ron described to us, and you have 2 partners in the business, and they decide to split up the business, do they sign an agreement where there's a non-compete clause? For example, the 2 partners would no longer remain in the same business, or do they maintain the same business and compete with each other? How do you deal with that sort of thing?
Alana, you want to go first?
Sure, or maybe Ron. I don't know if Ron wants to address that one.
Well, if you allow me, in that case, what happened, Albert, was very, very simple. Yes, we signed an agreement. We signed a non-compete 2-year agreement where we divided the list of customers, his customers and my customers, was a non-compete for 2 years. And when the non-compete opened up, we realized, both of us, that these customers remained very loyal. It's exceptional in our business because there is tremendous level of loyalty. But so really, we did not clash at any point, and it really helped us rebuild our brotherly and friendly relationship, which was great.
It's amazing. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
I had a situation, Albert, where it was very difficult to actually sort of have a non-compete. It was in an industry where they couldn't sort of maintain a non-compete. We just split them out in January, so we'll see how that plays out. My hopes is that, but we have set up as a kind of a board of advisors, which I'm one of the members, where we're hoping that will sort of, we'll keep some peace through an advisory kind of over a period of time, where we set it out for a 2-year period. So, but I would highly recommend, as Ron just said, that they enter into some type of non-compete.
Right.
Alana, you were going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say, and it's not only about non-competes, but I guess, unfortunately, in a way, a lot of the work I do is around disputes. So I would say, half my work is, and the part I really like the best is setting up families for success. But the real way I learned a lot of this stuff is seeing all the terrible things that can happen when the families are not set up for success. And a thoughtful agreement, no matter what the issue is, goes a very long way. And in some cases that will include a non-compete or compensation or other things. And bad agreements are bad. So it's important that these agreements are handled with a great deal of care, and it takes time. These are not things that to be rushed.
Super. Well,
Thank you.
I wanted to thank the 3 of you for giving of your time. I know you're all very busy. I thought it was fantastic. Ron, I really, again, appreciated that you've shared so much with us and gave us such interesting insights. And for Tasso and Alana, I mean, as a business owner myself and having, 4 teenage children, I think about this a lot. So it definitely gave me some better structure, at least in terms of thinking about this. And so I appreciate that. So this was our second of 4 series of speakers. Tasso will be back for the 4th one, along with his colleague Justine, and I'll be actually the introducer for that one. So I'll give a little story about my evolution in business. In 2 weeks, on May the 11th, we have Ronald Rubin from Medicom introducing, and he's gone through a really interesting business transformation through this pandemic. As for those of you who don't know, Medicom is in the PPE business. Now we all know what PPE means. On the surface, everyone thinks, oh, business must have been fantastic, but there were, I believe, quite a bit of challenges as well as opportunities. So it's going to be really interesting to hear what he has to say. So mark your calendars on May the 11th at noon. And he's going to be introducing Jonathan Raymond and Angie Hall from HSBC. And they're going to talk about sustainable finance. So Ron talked about sustainability efforts in his business. I think now, the banking world and the financing world is also aligning, and even the investment world, many investors, there's many funds that are focused just on sustainable type businesses. So, I think it's wonderful that when businesses try to use their platform to do good, and we're Spanish and Portuguese, we're a Jewish institution, and as Jews, we're focused on doing mitzvahs. And so I think it's a great connection where businesses can do mitzvahs and help their communities and society in general. So we look forward to seeing you back on May 11th. I do want to say for Ron Gabbay, as a representative on the executive of the synagogue. First of all, Ron is, just for everyone to know, that he's been an extremely active participant in the synagogue, on the board, on the executive, as a trustee, and certainly as a contributor. Him and his wife and their family are part of our major donors program. And so we really appreciate you, Ron, and your family for everything you've done and continue to do. And I'd like to also mention that Richter has supported our annual giving campaign last year, which was very much appreciated. And so, you are collectively helping our synagogue prosper and sustain itself in the future. And you're certainly giving value to everyone who's listened in and everyone who will watch the recorded version of this segment. So thank you all very much. Wish you all a wonderful day, a wonderful afternoon, and hope to see you all back in 2 weeks.